Secretary of Health and Hospitals Alan Levine says he called for an internal audit of DHH payroll records after a 9 News investigation revealed large amounts of overtime within DHH. DHH developmentalist Teresa Mosley, for example, logged nearly 4,000 hours of overtime in 2008. According to the audit, there's an explanation for that. A DHH computer program that calculates pay seems to have trouble calculating time and a half for overtime. Because of that, supervisors were instructed to record, for example, 12 hours when only 8 were actually worked.
Basically what happened was some of them were overstated for certain cases, depending on the position, and some weren't.
Of the 65 DHH workers included in our investigation, auditors say they did not find any workers who acted improperly or lied about the amount of overtime worked. DHH Deputy Chief of Staff J.T. Lane says our 9 News report helped highlight a glitch in their computer system.
It was something that we had not anticipated, I suppose, and so basically what a lot of supervisors were trying to do was sort of improvise at the time, given what they had, to properly compensate.
The audit shows because of those computer issues, Mosley recorded 800 more overtime hours than she actually worked. Once properly calculated and corrected, Mosley's reported overtime hours for 2008 now amount to 3,151 hours, an average of still 61 hours of overtime each and every week. Auditors also examined timesheets for 7 other workers at the same DHH facility in Ruston where Mosley works and found the same situation. Once auditors adjusted the figures, they showed of those 7 employees, the total overtime hours were still eye-opening. Each one of those DHH workers averaged 2,354 overtime hours last year, an average of 45 hours of overtime each week. That's the final corrected figure. Auditors pointed to staff shortages as the main reason for high overtime numbers, adding that, quote, some employees choose to volunteer as much as possible because of the financial incentives they receive for working the overtime hours. Time and a half cash payments, end quote. The internal audit does place some fault on management at the DHH facility in Ruston, known as the Northeast Supports and Services Center. Quote, in retrospect, the management at NESSC realizes that many of the employees were allowed to work too many overtime hours to ensure the safety of the employees and the consumers they supervised, end quote. Now, Lane says our 9 News investigation has led to policy changes within DHH. There's now a 16-hour per week limit on overtime for some workers. He says they're also working to implement a uniform overtime policy, and they're looking into new software to better manage payroll records. Donna.
Thank you, Caroline.